colorless heart. Set your story in a world that has lost all color. Colorless Heart by Lucy Apatow. Marie roused from sleep in the double bed inside the Paris Hilton Hotel. She sank into the comfort of the silky sheets and the fresh fabric smell. A smile splashed across her face, unable to open her eyes just yet. Freedom at last. Just her. No one else. No jumping on eggshells. Not being caught off guard. No secrets. No lies. Just Marie. No other soul in this room. Away from him. But it wasn't only about liberation. It was about protection. Keeping her loved ones safe. She had to keep them alive. And this was the only way. Freedom for herself, but separation from her loved ones. But that one person foremost in her brain. Salvatore. Marie had recently attended a gun range and learned how to fire a gun, just in case. She never knew when she might need to use it. It was about protection. The alarm on her mobile phone jerked her fully awake. A yawn filtered through as she slowly opened her eyes and spotted her phone on the dull black bedside table that had been brown yesterday. The white cushions that had been hues of purple. The black curtains that had been taupe. The ash-black carpet beneath the bed that had been gray. And the black sky through a gap in the window curtain that had been blue. No more blue skies. No more shades other than black and white. The world had lost its color. Marie's breath quickened as her heart palpitated. She rose from bed and rubbed her eyes hard. It had to be her eyes. Had she suddenly become colorblind? Where were all the bright, vibrant colors when it was what she needed? She shut, then opened her eyes, but nothing changed. Her world was drab, colorless, soulless. Her shoulders slumped over. Her head bowed. A slow chill ran up and down her spine. Curiosity peaked. Her skin reddened and turned hot. She had no choice but to be here in this colorless world. What had happened overnight to turn her entire world into a shroud of darkness with only black and white in its midst? Marie wandered outside the hotel, lost in a world where she knew no one. She had left Melbourne to make a fresh start in Paris, so nobody would find her. So he couldn't find her. She couldn't believe having woken up in Oaths, with shades of gray and black blocking her view of natural color, light, and even shades of gray. A bench with a view of the River Seine looked inviting as she made her way over, put her bag down, and stared at the calm ripples with a view of the majestic Eiffel Tower. Sailing boats anchored in the water, bunched up trees, and riders swinging their arms inside canoes. The wind scraped her face in the winter. Nothing but black and white Marie flashed back to her former life. Back home where she worked as an interior designer, married to a man she didn't love, and friends who would most likely understand her escape. Yesterday, her world was dark, but today, after she awoke, it became darker, grittier, and scarier. Did this lack of color mean something? Could she no longer design with color to refresh old homes or design new ones if she wanted to start over in France? She had not rung anyone except her best friend Helena about her sudden escape for their own protection. With a call from a burner phone, she announced her safe arrival. "Do you have color? Or has the world changed?" Helena replied. "What are you talking about? The things in the world. They're in black and white, Helena. I woke up this morning and nothing was in color. No blues, browns, pinks, purple, yellows, or any color. All gone. Is Melbourne the same? Don't be silly, Marie. We still have color. Have you become colorblind? Had your eyes checked? You couldn't have become colorblind in an instant. Go get them tested. Oh, and please stay safe. I don't know when I'll call you next. You know how he is. He could be tracking this conversation, even if it's on a burner phone. I love you, Marie. And I'm glad you're safe now. One day, we'll be together again." Marie fought back tears after ending the call. She would miss her loved ones, but she still didn't get what was going on. Was she the crazy one? Or did only Paris lose its color? With a sigh, Marie rose and made her way back to the hotel, knowing she'd have to find herself permanent residence. As she crossed the wide road, a towering man brushed her shoulder. "Oh, sorry." He locked eyes with her and walked ahead of her on the other side of the road. His broad shoulders and black eyes made her shudder, stopping in his tracks. "I have a message to give you." She angled her head. "Who are you?" "Here, take this," he said. She retrieved the note. He watched her. Who the hell was this guy? And why was he making her nervous? "Who are you?" "I'm just the messenger, lady. Read the note." "Who sent you?" He inched his way closer. Benny did. "Now read the note." "No, not again." He found her. Would this bastard ever leave her alone? With a shuddering breath, she unfolded the note, her hands shaking and the back of her neck sweating. Bits of her skin prickled. What was this? She had to be dreaming as she read the note, her vision blurred, as if the words weren't real. The threat wasn't real. "Meet me in front of the Louvre tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. sharp, or someone you love dies." The same old threats again. How did he find me? The man bared his crooked teeth with a smile. He swaggered off into the distance. It wasn't over. It never would be. The next morning, Marie paced her steps towards the Louvre, a queue that was a mile long. She wondered if anyone would ever reach the entrance to the museum. The glass panels of the building distracted her from the enemy she was about to meet. Each step drew her closer to the devil. When would it end? Her breath hitched as she stepped on uneven ground, razor-sharp pain cutting into her lower back as she fought the gust of frozen wind. She had to free herself. But how? He would always find her, threaten her, obsess over her, and abuse her. She'd been abused for 3 torturous years. Storm clouds brewed when Marie drew closer to the swarms of people. It was almost 9 o'clock, and passers-by stared at her as if she as an alien. Was it obvious she was heading towards her death chamber, to her dreaded foe? A cold caress at the back of her neck made her freeze in her spot. She turned. It was him. Benny. In all his wealthy glamour, the bastard wore a black tie, black buttoned-up suit jacket over a black cashmere jumper with black pleated pants over Italian leather shoes. He smelled rich. "Follow me," he said, as he prodded her towards an unknown destination. They walked in silence as his intermittent glares unnerved her. The squeeze of his arm draped through hers, leaving bruises, but she said nothing. His pinch at the back of her neck made her flinch, but she said nothing. The push and pull of her hair strands made her want to cry out, but she didn't. Hidden pain to display her fake strength. When finally, she sat down outside the cafe with its outdoor setting, he ordered hot drinks and croissants. No one does what you did and gets away with it. She swallowed, her lip trembling as she stared past him. "Please don't hurt him," he chuckled and threw his head back, his stained white teeth prominent. Flicking a cigarette over an ashtray, he tilted his head. "You're lucky I love you, Marie. If I didn't love you, you'd be dead by now. But you ever try something like this again, and I won't hesitate to slash your throat, feed your decrepit body to the fish in the Seine River. Got that?" She nodded, a black spot clouding her vision. Puffs of smoke floated towards her and made her cough. Not that he cared. He was a narcissist. He retrieved his phone. "Watch this. No, I mean business, Marie. I don't blow damn smoke up my arse." She gripped the phone and saw him, tied up to a chair, gagged, beaten, tortured. 2 black eyes, bruising across his cheek, haggard, frail, head hanging down low, as if giving up. "No, don't give up, my love. Never give up." A gasp of air grounded her. Rattling teeth must have made her look scared in front of him. "Is he all right?" he scoffed. "That depends on you. You put 1 foot wrong. Leave me again, and he dies. Only when we're safely back home, he'll be released. The waiter returned with the croissants and hot coffees. Sorry about the croissants. They're a little overcooked, but these are more their natural yellow. Marie winced. But those croissants are black, not yellow. He waved a hand. Don't mind her. She's the constant joker. But no worries. We'll have them as they are. The waiter nodded. Black, you say? Benny glared. Leave us. The waiter walked off with a curious gaze. He turned to her. What is wrong with you? Can't you see the color of the food? How could he not see what she was seeing? What was wrong with her? No, everything is black and white. I don't see color anymore. He laughed. Are you telling me you don't? You see the brown coffees, the blue ashtray, the beige tablecloth, my red tie, my dashing blue eyes. Her heart missed a beat as she gritted her teeth. No, I lost sight of color this morning. I woke up like this. Everything is black and white. Interesting, he said. Marie looked past him and spotted the man she'd seen earlier. The one who had given her the note. He was standing by a lamppost, sculling a bottle of beer. Why was he around? He must have been Benny's bodyguard, in case she made a run for it. Marie and Benny stepped inside her hotel room. He pushed her towards the wardrobe. Start packing. Our flight leaves in a few hours. Okay then. She pushed aside her floating tears and steeled herself by pulling out her suitcase from underneath the bed, unzipping it. As if in a surreal world, she pulled clothing off hangers and threw them into the suitcase. She was going back to her prison, away from the love of her life. If only she had been stronger a few years ago, when he had framed her ex-boyfriend, Salvatore, for murder, just so he could be free from prison. She was forced to marry him. Marriage to Benny in exchange for Salvatore's freedom. She had never explained why she'd broken up with him. Had to convince Salvatore she no longer loved him. It had cut her insides, but she had to keep him safe. Salvatore had not given up on her and found ways for them to meet secretly. But Benny always found out about their secret rendezvous. He had put plans in place, made the worst things happen. Benny involved in Salvatore crashing his car, ruining his reputation in business, injuring his friend with a beating by his henchmen, and almost killing him at least twice. Now Salvatore was threatened with death. What more could the creep do? I'm having a shower, he said. She sat on the bed. How could she go back with him? But she had no choice when Salvatore would die if she didn't. Benny's phone lay on the bedside table. Curious, she picked it up and found his recording. Salvatore was still tied to the chair, still tortured and broken. But wait, something was weird about this video. The actions were the same. His movements repeated in a cycle, as if it was on a loop. This wasn't her true love life. This was a fake video. It had to be. Could Salvatore have arranged this? Outsmarted Benny again? She smiled to herself. Now she had a chance to do something. Fight him. Hurt him. But no, she wasn't a violent person and had morals. Nothing like Benny. What could she do? Run away again? But Benny might pursue Salvatore and never stop. He would never stop finding her until his own death. She knew that. So what could she do? She could never reason with a crazy person. A knock on the door made her jolt in her spot. It could be anyone. Her heart racing, she slowly opened the door and flinched when the man from earlier pushed past her. "Where's Benny? What are you doing here?" the man whispered in her ear. "Listen, Salvatore will set you free. Get out of here." She swallowed, her vision blurring. What? The back of her neck sweated as one ear listened in on Benny in the shower. "No time to talk. Leave. Now. We'll take care of this." She was right. It was a fake recording. He'd escaped. Where is he? The man swung the gun in his hand, scanning past her. "He's closer than you think. Go now." Her heart soared, and a spot of color flashed in her vision. But only fleetingly. It turned black and white again. What in hell is going on here? Benny grasped something from his back pocket. "Why are you here?" The man shrugged until reaching his side pocket and shooting towards Benny, who shifted to the side, the bullet grazing his cheek. But Benny pulled out his own gun and took aim. The gun hit the man square in the chest. He fell back against the door with a thud. Marie quaked. It was over. No love, no freedom. "You will never leave me." "Never, Marie. Get that. Nobody will ever take you away from me. Grab your things. Hurry up." He shifted the strange man's body to the bathroom, blood pouring out of him like a tap. When he returned, Benny shoved her aside and flung the remainder of her clothes into the suitcase. "Now zip it up and let's leave pronto." He sat on the sofa and scrolled through his phone. A call to one of his stupid thugs. Goosebumps swarmed like insects over her arms as a dull ache at the back of her neck made her queasy. This had to stop. Slowly zipping up the baggage. A shuffling sound underneath the bed made her think she was hearing things. But no. She spotted a shoe protruding from the corner as someone glided further to the edge near the bedside table. Salvatore appeared and placed a finger across his lips, hefting a gun. She moved towards Benny, pulled the suitcase off the bed, and retrieved her bag. "I'm ready." Salvatore flung himself in the open and approached Benny with an aim of his gun. "Put your hands up. Now." Benny flinched. "You have a death wish, don't you? You might have got away from my men, but you'll never win this war. I will fight you to the death, Benny. I don't care if I die, so long as Marie goes free. Free from your dungeon. Free from your psychopathic world. You loser. He faced Marie. Go now. I'll take care of this. She shook her head. We fight with our hands. Fight to the death. Benny scoffed. Fine with me. He shoved his pistol inside his back pocket and took a fighting stance while Salvatore did the same. No, please, Salvatore. Just go. I can't be with you. Benny's my husband. I'm going back to Melbourne with him. Please leave. No, Marie, enough is enough. Benny threw the first punch, then another and another, until he went down. He gouged one of Salvatore's eyes and flung his head hard against the carpet. Marie moved. No, Benny, stop. I'll come with you. Please stop. Benny softened, giving Salvatore the chance to pound into Benny with a blow to the kidney, and then a swift kick in the leg. Lamps overturned, magazines tumbled in the air, and the coffee table shifted. Benny kicked him on the side of his abdomen, and he keeled over. She had to do something. But what? Benny reached for something in his pants pocket. A flick knife. No. He was going to break the rules. Not on her watch. Salvatore attempted to rise when Benny stepped forward. A smirk plastered over his face. He wandered over to him when the knife swung in the air. Marie reached for his back pocket, pulled out the gun, and aimed. Stop, or I'll shoot, he scoffed. You don't have the guts. Don't even know guns. Benny ignored her, about to stab Salvatore in the throat. Marie pulled the trigger and shot him twice in the stomach. The knife fell, and he dropped like a sack of potatoes. Blood seeped onto the carpet, and she watched and waited for the life force to draw out of him. 3 years of hell. 3 years of watching over her shoulder. 3 years of fearing the lives of her loved ones. Walking quietly on eggshells. Those days were over as the rotten apple drew his last breath. Salvatore shuffled towards her and hugged her. I love you, Marie. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from him. You've always protected me. She beamed. I love you too, Salvatore. She savored the gentle caress of her lover's strong arms around her waist. Her eyes shifted, her surroundings vibrating with color. Nor more colorless world, heartbeat of the home. Why can't I remember, he thought. His mind would only reveal flashes of the afternoon's events. His head was on fire, sweat dripping down his face like an addict on autopilot. Grant Liscombe burst through the front door, avoiding his mother in the kitchen. Like a spider returning to its web, his lanky teenage legs scurried up the wooden stairs of the old farmhouse to his bedroom. His arms flailed with uncontrollable fear as he yanked the dirt-covered shirt over his head, discarded it on the floor, then bounded to the bathroom, slamming the door. What have I done? What have I done? he muttered, lathering the perfumed soap through his fingers, frantic to wash the guilt from his newly calloused hands, watching the streaks of dirt dance and swirl down the rusty drain. His mind was confused by broken images of helping to clean the gutters, the ladder falling. Or was it pushed? The thud as Nick's body hit the ground, and the gleam of the metal shovel as Grant dug the body-sized hole. He confronted the reflection in the mirror, the gaunt, bloodshot, black-haired punk he had become. Oh God, what have you done? The reflection glared back with an evil grin. It began about a month ago, after his factory worker stepfather, Nick, lost his job. Grant's middle-aged mother, Jane, with little work experience, was initially grateful for the offer to stay at her aunt's derelict house, remotely located in the Haliburton Highlands of Ontario. Soon, she would regret it. They arrived late on an October evening, rain pelting down. The overwhelming stench of mold and decay nauseated Grant as he stepped onto the porch, past two white rattan chairs resembling broken skeleton bones. Like two cracked teeth, the front window panes whistled as Nick opened the door, and a rush of twisted oak leaves fluttered into the foyer, landing at the base of an antique grandfather clock. "Wow! Look at that beauty!" Grant exclaimed, smitten with the intricate carvings of the mahogany cabinet, the shiny gold filigree face, moon dial, and hands, all in pristine condition, a sharp contrast to the rest of the house. "Hey, Mom, didn't Grandpa have a clock like this?" He set down his backpack, rubbed his hands over the smooth, flawless finish, inhaling the rich smell of lacquer and lemon polish, opened the case to wind the weights, then set the hands to the correct time. "Yes, he did," she answered, removing her coat and shaking the rain from her short blonde hair. "But not as old as this one. Remember what Grandpa always said? The tick of a clock is the heartbeat of the home," they repeated in unison, their heartfelt laughter filling the room with his memory. "But seriously, Grant," she said, pointing at the clock. "That thing gives me the creeps," Grant shrugged. Then, as he tapped the pendulum to start the clock, he felt a sudden chill in the air, a quiver in the continuum of space and time. The walls around him seemed to expand and contract, like the lungs of the house had taken a deep breath. "Are you all right, Grant?" His mother's face concerned. "You look pale." "He's fine," said Nick. "Quit coddling him, Jane. He isn't a child anymore." He chuckled and gently kissed her forehead. "I'll finish bringing in the rest of the stuff." Grant sensed something was terribly wrong. Something had taken control of his body. His mind shouted with fear as his consciousness slipped deeper into an abyss, and a different, cunning voice answered. I'm okay, Mom. After the family had settled in for the night, the clock softly chimed the midnight hour, and its demon contemplated setting its evil plans in motion. Returning to his room, Grant changed into clean clothes and put on some loud, heavy metal music. He suspected his mother was having issues with his new identity. He began rifling through his closet, not sure what he was looking for. Then, at last, he found it: the metal slugger baseball bat. As he held the handle, he confirmed that Mother was next. "Grant," his mother called from the kitchen, aroma of roast beef wafting up the stairs. "Are you guys done outside? Dinner's almost ready." The stairs creaked with warning as he descended each step. Slow and deliberate, bat at the ready. A satanic song blared out of his room, the heavy bass pounding the walls. Thump, thump, thump. "Turn it down," she shouted, stirring the gravy pot, steam filling the room from the whistling kettle. But his music grew louder. He continued his mission, unhindered. From deep inside, Grant could feel the raw hatred of the demon inhabiting his body, its cruel intention, but was powerless to intervene. Suddenly, like a beacon of light through the darkness, he heard a familiar voice. "Remember the heartbeat of the home." It was Grandpa. "Grant," the voice said, "kill the heartbeat." Jane Liscombe turned off the stove and stormed out of the kitchen, down the hall, stopping at the grandfather clock at the base of the stairwell. I said, "Turn it." Stopping mid-sentence, she screamed and jumped back, just as the bat came crashing down, barely missing its target. Grant gripped tighter, then swung again, this time hitting a home run as the bat smashed the glass of the grandfather clock, dislodging the pendulum and sending it flying across the room. The chimes clanged noisily in pain as he swung again and again until the battered clock showed no signs of life. Grant's grandfather's undying love had helped him overcome the demon within him and return to H.'s former self. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked, reaching out to hold her, just as Nick came limping through the front door, rubbing his head. "Nick, you're alive!" Grant shouted in surprise and relief, running to hug him. "Nick, are you all right?" "What happened?" Jane asked, still badly shaken. "I thought he was holding the ladder," he said angrily. "Must have fallen and knocked myself out." He looked around in disbelief at the shards of glass and pieces of wood scattered on the floor. "What the hell happened here?" "I'll explain in the car. We've got to leave. Now," Grant exclaimed as he helped Nick and his mother out of the house. They drove to the nearest motel, never to return. 2 years later, a young couple turned the key in the tarnished brass lock of their newly rented farmhouse in the Halliburton Hills, and as the warm sunlight shone into the foyer, a spectacular sight was revealed. A beautiful mahogany grandfather clock I know everything. I know everything. Ask me how many miles there are between San Francisco and Cleveland. I know. Ask me how long the trip would take. I know. Choose any country, any time period, and ask me to recount its entire history. I know. I know everything. I clearly remember the moment of my birth and every detail of my existence until yesterday. What I cannot recall is what happened over the past 12 hours and 9 minutes. It is now 10:03 a.m. on Thursday. My last memory of reading page 189 occurred last night at precisely 9:54 p.m. It started when Mrs. Banks, Claire, requested that I take a memo. Shelley, darling, would you please remind me? Request budget meeting with Charles. Sign divorce papers and send to attorney ASAP. Scheduled for 11:15 on Friday. I have made notes, Claire. I will ring your phone with reminders. Thank you, Shelley. You've always been there for me, you know. She half smiled at me, her head slightly cocked to the side, as if wanting to say more. She stared exactly 3.2 seconds longer than usual, which I found curious. Perhaps she had realized that her words hinted at affection, and there was no point in showing affection to me. I do not show affection. Claire, we will need to leave exactly 23 minutes earlier tomorrow morning, I told her. There will be much traffic because of the snow. Yes, of course, Claire answered, looking anxiously out of the window, her short blonde locks appearing silvery in the reflection. I have cleaned the snow from around the house. I will do so again during the night, so it will be clear when we leave for work. Thank you, Shelley. Claire did not turn around. Is it supposed to snow all night? According to various reports, the snow is scheduled to end by 1:00 a.m. Oh, okay, that's good, Claire said, still gazing at the snowdrifts. I completed tidying up the living room and retired to my chamber. After the long day, I very much needed to recharge. At 9:52 p.m., I sat down in my usual chair, plugged in the power cord, pulled the cord of the lamp, and reached for a new book. In my quest to be a better companion to Claire, I had taken up the habit of reading throughout the night. As she slept, I usually educated myself so that I could discuss with her the following day. Although I easily had online access to every piece of information I could want, I frequently consulted the bound books that Claire insisted on collecting in her spacious library. Over the years, the collection had grown to precisely 4,573 books. Since Claire loved stories, but did not have much free time after work to read, I often read a volume so that we could discuss it the next day. Over the years, I have perfected my speech patterns and inflections to align closely with hers so that she is most comfortable in our conversations. Claire always asked me about what I had read as we drove, during lunch, or after dinner. Sometimes she requested that I recite passages for her. Other times, a summary sufficed. She enjoyed dissecting story plot lines and characters. arguing philosophical questions, and considering historical perspectives. Ours had been a pleasant relationship over the course of her life for 51 years. Most of the time, it was just the two of us, except for some interruptions over the years. There had been a Mr. Banks, but he had finally filed for divorce last month. Fool. Did he really think Mrs. Banks would choose him over me? She had not always been Mrs. Banks. For most of her life, she was Claire Perez. I had watched her toddle around her parents' lonely mansion while they jetted around the world on business trips. I had seen her through the rebellious teenage years and followed her as she embarked on silly adventures. I had helped her through college and graduate school, always attempting to make her life just a little bit easier. Later, I had been by her side as she built her investment company, layer by layer, year by year, into the mega million-dollar enterprise it was today. I had assisted Claire over the years through breakup after breakup, as each new man in her life had disappointed her. William, the jeweler; Enrico, the attorney; Gustav, the stockbroker. And yes, I had seen her through the deaths of two particularly stubborn beaus: Tom, the architect, and Bob, the surgeon. I had allowed this latest, Stanley Banks, the professor, to marry her because she told me she was truly happy with him. I did not perceive him to be a threat at first. He had held on the longest. 1 year, 2 months, 5 days, 11 hours. The day they met at the beach, I thought he might be trouble, but I was sure I could handle him. Shelley, come meet Stanley. Oh my gosh, he saved my life. I swam out too far, but luckily, this handsome man swam out to save me. I, of course, would have been present to save Claire had she not requested I return to the car to retrieve her sun hat. Thank you, Stanley, I said. Your heroism is much appreciated. They were inseparable from that day. It was an adjustment when he moved in with us. Stanley encouraged Claire to read her own books, and they frequently sat in the evenings going over literary passages and discussing history and philosophy. I did not appreciate Stanley taking over my job. They went to plays and museums. I am quite capable of accessing such information. But they did not want me to do so. They went to vineyards for wine tasting. I do not drink wine. When I explained I could not partake, Claire smiled and told me it was all right. She insisted this would be a good time to find some hobby of my own to do. She did not understand that for 51 years I have existed merely for her. I spoke to Stanley, but he did not understand either. My typical means of persuasion were lost on him. He did not scare easily, nor would he be convinced. I changed course and focused on removing all other impediments to our happiness. Perhaps she would tire of Stanley without the others. Claire did not need the friends who visited. It was easy to dissuade them. But Stanley stayed. I wondered if I had waited too long to act. Lately, I had suspected something was wrong between them. And then, one day, when they thought I was still out of the house grocery shopping, I overheard them. "Claire, we don't need her. Anything she does for you, you can just do yourself. Why is she even here? No, Stanley, I can't turn her out. Shelley has been with me since I was an infant. That doesn't mean she has to stay with you constantly. And honestly, I'm uncomfortable always having a third wheel around. It's like having a chaperone, or like having two wives. I don't care. Shelley stays. I'm not talking about this anymore. Claire, I'm not sure how much longer I want to deal with this." It was the opportunity I had been waiting for. After that, it was not difficult to persuade Stanley to move out. Claire and I resumed our previous routines. I did not question her, nor did she mention the cause of the breakup. She did not know I had overheard their argument. She did not know of many things I had done. In the past, after the others, life had gotten back to normal rather quickly. But Mr. Banks was different. Although Claire had tried to act happy, I sometimes felt that she was not being truthful about her feelings. She often seemed anxious and preoccupied. No matter. She does not need him. She has me. This morning, I open my eyes and jump up with a start as I realize it is 10:03 a.m. on Thursday. Claire was due at work an hour ago. I must wake her and drive her to the office. I stand up and instantly reach for the edge of the table to steady myself. This has never happened to me before. I do not become ill. I know everything. If I sense something is wrong, I diagnose and fix the problem. I do not understand what is happening now. There is no indication of malfunction, yet I feel ill somehow. Something is wrong. I knock on Claire's door, but she does not answer. I open the door, I peek in and call her name, but she is not there. Her bed sheets have been smoothed, and the pillows rest carefully at the head of her bed. I check the bathroom, but she is not there. As I pass through her bedroom again, I glance out the window and notice immediately the car tracks leading from the garage, down the driveway, and out to the main road. She drove in the snow? That is my job. What is happening? Where could she be without me? At the moment, I am unable to perform a trace to find her location. I dial her cell phone, which she picks up on the second ring. "Claire, where are you? I am concerned for your safety." Claire laughs. "Shelley, I'm at work. You seemed like you needed more rest this morning, so I drove myself. It wasn't bad at all. The storm is over and the roads are clear. Take the day. We can catch up tonight when I get home." "No, I must be there for you." "Shelley, I'm fine. I insist that today you recharge and think of yourself. I can manage on my own." I'm going to a meeting now. I'll see you tonight. The phone clicks dead. What am I to do alone all day? After my chores are completed, I will still have 5 hours, 23 minutes, and 15 seconds before Claire arrives home. Why does she not need me to assist at her meeting? Why is there a 12-hour, 9-minute gap in my memory? I begin my chores immediately, as I thrive on routine. I search my memory for any recollection past 9:54 p.m., but it is no use. There is nothing. I check for 11 p.m. while I load the dishwasher. There is nothing for 12 to midnight as I vacuum the carpets. 1 a.m. is lost as I shovel the snow. I thoroughly search for 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. while I do the laundry. I do it all. There is no need to hire a gardener, a housekeeper, a cook. 4 a.m., 5 a.m., 6 a.m. all are blank as I prepare dinner. I am puzzled. I sit down to wait for Claire and search in vain for 7, 8, and 9 a.m. All moments are lost until 10:03 a.m. this morning. Surely research can help me to retrieve those hours. But research only proves to be more confusing. Why can I not understand? Why must I consult any other source? I am the ultimate source. I have always known the answers. I know everything. Now I do not know. I notice suddenly that there are still 3 hours and 52 minutes before Claire returns. Why did I prepare dinner so early? My internal clock must be broken. I attempt to diagnose the malfunction, but cannot. No matter. I will discard the dinner and prepare a new one just before Claire returns. I decide to inspect the charger. Perhaps it will yield an explanation for my missing hours. I sit down in my chair and pick up the cord. Suddenly, I hear a click. I spring up and attempt to turn the handle to the door of my room. But it is locked. That is odd. No matter. I can easily break out of the room. There is no door lock that can hold me, except something is wrong. I do not have the strength to break the lock this time. How can this be? I am fully recharged, and I do not become ill. I do not become weak. You thought you would get away with it, Shelley. I hear Claire's voice outside the door. Claire, you are home early, I say. Please open the door. I seem to be locked in. No, Shelley. I will not open the door. You have to stop. I thought you were my friend, but you have been my greatest enemy. Claire, I do not know what you mean. Please open the door, and we will discuss. I do not know why Claire is speaking to me this way. I am sure we will correct whatever the problem may be. No, the time to discuss is over. I know what you've been doing. You've been chasing everyone away. I've had no one because of you. But not this time. Stanley is the only one you can't scare off. Stanley. I search my memory for all recent conversations, involving Stanley. Somehow, he tricked me. But that is not possible. I know everything. I can account for every word spoken in this house, every action taken, everything that has happened for 51 years, except for the past 12 hours, 9 minutes. I hear Stanley's voice in the hall, and I instantly know that he is responsible for those lost hours. What did he do? How could he know more than I do? It is not possible. I know everything. Stanley, I say, we can start over. I am sorry for my actions. Shelley, you are too dangerous to be allowed to continue. We've called the authorities. Stanley says, but how did you do this? I am confused. You are so consumed with Claire that you never bothered to find out about me, Stanley continues. I teach history now, but my previous career was in computer programming. I specialized in cybersecurity. I guess you don't know everything, after all, Claire adds. I only wanted to protect Claire. Open the door. It will be all right. If they will just open the door, I can persuade them. But neither Claire nor Stanley answers me. I hear them walking down the stairs. I hear the front door open and close, and I hear them get into the car and drive away. They will not go far. After all, I am everything to Claire. I do it all. She will not function long without me. She does not need him. She needs me. I know everything. She will return for me. I sit down in my chair and plug in the charger. I will wait. Claire will distort it. I left home 5 years ago. As soon as I crossed that stage, high school diploma in hand, bypassing my peers, swept up by a wave of crying mums and proud grandparents. I was done. The boot of my car held as much of my 18 years of life as I could stuff into 3 boxes and 1 suitcase. I'd armed myself with a bank account full of every tip and paycheck I'd received from my waitressing job and an early acceptance offer from a university 2 states away, as far as I could get from a place I'd once called home. The night before, as my parents sat in some fancy restaurant for a reservation with friends they'd forgotten to tell me about, undoubtedly arguing with each other behind plastic smiles, I packed away my clothes and books and bed sheets in neat little rows until my room was almost barren. Apart from the old wooden furniture, my bedroom was cleaner than it had probably ever been, and I laughed at thinking about how, if the situation was different, it might finally make my mother happy with me. At 10:07 p.m., they arrived home, my father slamming the door as their whisper shouting floated upstairs. I knew they weren't being considerate of the fact that I might be sleeping, but rather they worried about the possibility that a commotion might alert the neighbors, that they would see through the cracks in the foundations of their picture-perfect dream house. They didn't come in to say goodnight. Hadn't since I was 8. and old enough to read myself to sleep. As I pulled out of the parking lot and left my formative school years in the back windshield, I thought about what my parents would tell their friends, the neighbors, the busybodies in the grocery store checkout line. Would they lie and tell everyone I had accepted a scholarship for some prestigious university overseas? Or maybe I'd traveled to Africa to work in humanitarian aid. Something they could brag about and say, "She's made us so proud." Possibly, they'd invent a job with NASA or an internship at Google. They hardly knew enough about me to know what I'd actually be studying or what I wanted to be when I grew up. I was sure they wouldn't be bold enough to tell the truth, that their daughter had disappeared without warning while they spent their day in board meetings and having sex with their personal assistants in hotel rooms paid for by their companies. There would be no missing persons report or flyers offering an egregious sum of money in reward for my safe return home. Nothing that would cast a shadow on their spotless reputations. I would fade further into the background of their lives, as if a figment of their imagination, only resurrected when one of their friends spotted me in one of the professionally shot family photos, stilted and artificial, and asked after me. That's if they kept the frames up at all. My parents would have to dig up my coffin from the deepest parts of their memory, plaster a smile on their face, and grit their teeth. They would spin some vague anecdote about speaking to me on the telephone last Tuesday and how well I was doing. And maybe they'd go visit me at Christmas. They'd have forgotten all about me by the time they brought out the first course. I mean, they hardly remembered I existed, even while we lived under the same roof. That's why I was so shocked when they called me one Sunday, 5 years after I left town and never looked back, and asked me to come for a visit soon. I had no idea how they knew my number. I'd changed it after moving and never given them the new one. That's why I didn't respond for almost a minute after hearing my father's voice through the tiny speaker. I almost convinced myself I was dreaming or having a stroke. Maybe I'd temporarily slipped into an alternate reality where it was normal for my father to have my number, to call me out of the blue and invite me over. Anything to explain why the fuck he was calling. There was no special occasion. Nobody was sick and dying. And there was no upcoming birthday to celebrate. They just wanted to see how I was doing and make amends. They missed me, they said, through the crackling of the landline. I wondered if they had finally snapped and gone crazy, if they'd learned a sense of humor and this was some kind of prank. Or perhaps they had early onset dementia and had forgotten that I had never been much more than a roommate they had complained about having to spend their hard-earned money on. I told them I would think about it and immediately hung up. I spent the next 2 days trying to forget about it altogether until I came home from work to a letter in my mailbox. a one-way ticket dated 2 weeks from then, set to arrive at the airport an hour out from the town I grew up in. On the front of the envelope, my address, written in my mother's sloping, elegant handwriting. Nausea settled in the pit of my belly. How did they know my address? I'd not kept in contact with a single person from my childhood. The hairs on the back of my neck tingled as the growing sense of being watched settled into my skin. Then a thought popped into my head. Had they known the whole time? Had they known where I was all these years and never bothered to reach out? Suddenly, I was 12 again, and realizing my parents were never going to care about me the way the kids at school were cared for. This confirmed what I had always known. I was alone in this world. It took some deliberating, but I decided I would go. I would see what it was they wanted from me, and if they really had changed. I told myself I wouldn't give in to whatever manipulation tactics they might pull. I would be strong and remain distant. And when it was done, I would demand that they never contact me again. Even still, my bones were heavy with paranoia the following weeks. I elected to hire a rental car to drive from the airport to their house. There was no way I'd give my parents the satisfaction of driving me, of having any modicum of control over me once more. And this way, if I needed to leave, I wouldn't be forced to wait 20 minutes for a taxi. I parked on the street. The house had been repainted a soft eggshell color instead of the previous gray and rows of gardenias lined the fence where there had once been neat box hedges. I breathed deeply through my nose before raising my hand to knock. My mother pulled the door open as my fist made contact with the wood, causing me to stumble back. She must have been watching me from the window. Waiting, she was smiling. That was strange in its own right, but it was weirder because I knew it wasn't my mother's smile. Her smile never reached her eyes. She would never do anything that would cause lines to form on her face. Her smile always gave you the sense that she was laughing at you rather than with you, pitying you. My mother did not smile, but when she did, it was always forced. This was a genuine smile. It was happy. I felt immediately that something was deeply wrong. A shiver ran through my spine. There was something wrong about her face. It was fuzzy around the edges, as if she was wearing a mask. I rubbed at my eyes with closed fists, trying to clear my vision, but the effect remained. I figured I was tired from my flight, but the closer I inspected her, the clearer it became that something was off. It looked as if someone had tried to draw her face as accurately as possible. After taking a long glance at a picture of it, my mother reached towards me with outstretched arms and drew me into an embrace. I stood stiffly, with my arms by my side, trying and failing to remember when she had last hugged me. surely at some point in my childhood. Definitely not after the age of 10. She invited me inside. This house was nothing like the one I'd left. Cold and sparse, decorated as if a model home. It was warm and filled with color and light. I wondered if somehow my memories of my horrible, lonely childhood had managed to warp my recollection of the house itself. But I knew that wasn't right. This new hallway was illuminated by a warm glow, and funky paintings hung from the walls. The dining table was set with a red gingham tablecloth that my mother would have called tacky, and a vase of sunflowers. In the kitchen, my father took a large tray out of the oven before pausing to take a long pull from the neck of a beer bottle. I had never seen my father drink beer before. He used to say it was the common man's drink, and that real men drank whiskey. He turned to say hello, and where his face had once been clean-shaven and professional, stubble grew freely. Like my mother, something was off. And it wasn't just the facial hair. His nose was smaller than I remembered. Eyes just a fraction too far apart. From afar, or at a passing glance, it was the man I'd grown up with. But as he stepped closer to greet me, his features shifted. It was like looking at an optical illusion, and when I changed my gaze, the true image would slip into place. They watched me. To anyone else, it might seem they were worried, for I hadn't said a word since my mother opened the door. But I could see it in their eyes, the suspicion. They were wondering if I'd noticed, waiting for me to say something. I stuttered out empty platitudes about being happy to see them, and they shuffled me over to sit at the table. Dinner was pistachio-encrusted chicken breast served with a peach and goat cheese salad. When my father announced the menu, I stopped short, fork raised halfway to my mouth. My mother was allergic to pistachios. This was a fact she despised, as she perceived any sort of weakness to be a flaw, and my mother was not flawed. I said as much, but my mother just stared at me with an odd look and told me she didn't have any allergies. She never had. And then she went on eating, cutting her chicken into bite-sized cubes and placing them delicately on her tongue, never breaking out in hives or becoming short of breath as her throat closed up. I was beginning to feel as if I was going out of my mind. I managed to stumble my way through conversation, letting my parents do the brunt of the work, barely processing a word they said. I excused myself to my room, citing exhaustion and an early night. My father followed with my bag, and as I reached the top of the stairs and turned right towards my old bedroom, he laughed at me. It wasn't the same boisterous laugh he'd had at dinner when discussing his golfing buddies. It was sharp and croaky, like it didn't belong to him. I hadn't seen my father laugh enough as a child. to know which one was more his own. "My bedroom was to the left," he said, with a curious look on his face. "Don't you remember?" And he pushed past me, guiding me down the corridor to a room I knew was not mine. I followed him slowly. Inside the doorway, he dropped my bag, calling good night over his shoulder as he moved back downstairs. I locked the door. The furniture was the same, but there were pictures on the wall I had no recollection of. Myself and my parents at the beach and in the snow and with my grandparents. These were not my pictures. My mother hated the sand, and the first time I'd been to the beach was with some uni friends a year after I left home. I had never met my grandparents, let alone taken photographs with them. They had both died before I was born. I sat down on the bed. It was made tidily, with the same striped sheets I had packed in a box all those years ago. I sat there for hours, listening as my parents cleaned and made their way to bed. When I was sure they were sleeping, I slipped out the door and into the rental car. As I drove to the airport, heart racing against my rib cage, I knew one thing for sure. I was certain that those people were not my parents. Thursday night, rain pattered on the roof of Grandma's house as Christine settled in after Thanksgiving dinner. She sat on the plush carpet and started playing solitaire on the coffee table. Mom was hollering at the football game, but Christine was doing her best to tune that out. Grandma was in the kitchen, finishing the dishes. Dinner itself had been the usual stuff: turkey, mashed potatoes, stuffing, green beans. It was a nicer, heartier meal than Christine usually ate. Now she was pleasantly full, enjoying her cards and the relative peace and quiet. "Why are the Lions attempting a field goal?" Mom roared, jumping up. She bumped the coffee table and fell back onto the couch. The game went to commercial. "Oh." Christine sighed heavily, picking up her fallen cards. "Sorry, kid," her mother said, rubbing her sore knee. "You know how it is." Christine nodded. It was always like this with football and true crime for some reason. She was glad it was only Mom here being noisy instead of the whole family. Grandma stepped into the living room, wiping her hands off on a towel. She hung it on the back of one of the wooden chairs at the little dining table, on the opposite side of the room from Christine and Mom. "I wish you'd let us help you," Mom said. "Dishes would have been done a lot sooner." No, Grandma said. "After being away for so long, I almost missed doing my own dishes. Besides, there weren't that many." "I tried to get the older kids to come," Mom said. The game was back on, so her eyes were on the TV as she spoke. But they had other plans. In-laws, I guess. And you know how Dad is. With this last remark, she gave Christine a joking slap on the shoulder. Christine was glad her father and siblings weren't there. When they all got together, they talked too loud and it would get too hot, and they would pick on and embarrass her. No, she much preferred this little get-together. "I keep telling you it's fine," Grandma said. She sat on the opposite end of the couch so that Christine was between them. She smiled at Christine. "It's kind of neat that we have 3 generations here," Christine nodded, smiling. "Touchdown!" Mom yelled and jumped up again, narrowly avoiding the coffee table this time. Thud. "Oh, for the love of..." Grandma cut herself off. "What did you knock over this time? I hope you haven't broken anything." "Shh." Mom held a finger to her lips and whispered, "That wasn't me. I think it came from outside." Grandma leaned back on the couch and put her feet up. "Probably just the rain, then, right?" Mom said. She seemed unsure, but she sat back down and was quickly reabsorbed in the game. Christine hesitated, card in hand. "Grandma," she asked. Her voice always came out softer than she expected. "Are you sure it's nothing?" "Of course," Grandma said proudly. "After a month of running around Europe, staying in all kinds of places with all kinds of people, these little noises don't frighten me anymore." "Was it scary in Europe?" Christine asked. She had to repeat the question because of Grandma's hearing and Mom's hollering. When she finally got the question, she answered, "Oh, no. I had a few near misses, but that happens anywhere. Actually, I think you should go sometime. You'd like it." Christine smiled and went back to her cards. She had only placed 2 cards down when she heard another noise. Crash. Her head whirled toward the sound. She noticed Mom and Grandma do the same. Mom muted the TV and looked back at them. "You heard that too?" she asked in a hush. Grandma nodded. Mom patted her pockets. "Ugh, must have left my phone in the car," she said. She looked at Grandma. "Where's yours?" "My cell phone?" asked Grandma. "You know I can't keep track of that thing." Mom looked to Christine. Christine slid her phone out of her pocket and held up the black screen. "Why do you think I'm playing solitaire?" Mom dragged her hands down her face. "Oh, don't be so dramatic," Grandma said. "It's probably nothing. I'll go take a look." "No," Mom said. "You stay here with Christine while I go take a look. Do you still have my old baseball bat by the door?" Grandma rolled her eyes and gestured to it. Mom picked it up and gripped it tight. She tossed on her raincoat and bolted the door. "You two stay here. I'll have a look around the back. Be careful," Christine said. Mom laughed and ruffled her hair. "I will." She kissed Christine on the top of her head and went through the kitchen and out the back door. It was silent as they waited, listening. "The house isn't that big," Christine said, wringing her hands. "How long could it take to look around?" Grandma wrapped Christine up in her arms. "Your mom's just being dramatic, dear," she said. "She'll probably go out and search the whole woods before she's satisfied. What if there's something out there, like a bear, or a vampire, or a maniac with an axe?" Christine cried into Grandma's shoulder. Grandma shook her head. Christine, where on earth would you get ideas like that? Christine pushed Grandma away and plopped down onto the couch. I know it's ridiculous. I'm just worried about Mom. After a pause, she added, and you know the only thing she loves more than football is true crime. I was practically raised by Keith Morrison. Grrr. Christine and Grandma looked at each other, confirming to each other that they had both heard it. An unearthly groaning. It sounded close. Christine shot up from the couch. Something's happened to Mom. I just know it. Grandma grabbed her arm. Don't be rash, dear. Christine suddenly wished the rest of her family were here. No wild animal or axe murderer would attack such a large party. She wasn't sure if the same could be said for supernatural creatures, but maybe her sisters or brothers or father would know what to do about them. Christine tugged her arm free from Grandma's grip. I'm going after her. You can come with me if you want. What were we thinking, splitting up like this? That's how they always get you in horror movies. Christine pulled on her raincoat, flipped up the hood, and flung open the door. Lightning cracked. On the porch, a figure was silhouetted against the storm, carrying Mom, unconscious in its arms. Grandma cried out and rushed forward. Rain instantly soaked her to the bone. Christine ran out after her to help. Wait, the stranger said. It was a man. Stop! Give me back my daughter! Grandma shouted. She and Christine kept pulling on his arms, trying to free Mom from his clutches. Dorothy! The man cried out. They all paused at the mention of Grandma's name. Finally, the man huffed. Can we go inside so I can explain? Oh, Sean, I'm so embarrassed, Grandma said. They were all back in the living room. Mom was laid out on the couch with a compress on her head. Christine and the man, Sean, were sitting at the dining table. Grandma placed a steaming cup of tea in front of Sean. I didn't recognize you, Grandma continued. Sean chuckled. I don't blame you. Anyone would be nervous in this situation. Excuse me, Christine cut in. But, who are you? And what happened to Mom? Oh, Grandma said. This is Sean, dear. I met him while I was in England. He saved my life. She's exaggerating, Sean said. Not so, said Grandma. He pulled me out of the way, just as I was about to be hit by a bus. Sean sipped his tea demurely. I told him he could come by for a visit any time, Grandma said. I tried to call, but I never got any answer. I remembered she doesn't use her cell phone, so I decided to surprise her, Sean explained with another little chuckle. Oh, well, thank you for saving her, Christine said. And Mom? I found her just in front of the porch. She must have slipped off the step and hit her head. Christine sipped at her own tea, feeling silly. She was glad the whole thing was over. Thud, Christine, Grandma, and Sean all looked at each other. They had all heard the noise. Christine looked at Mom. She had rolled off the couch and was groaning as she climbed back up onto it. "Anyone know who won the game?" she asked. "Toxic confections. Beep, beep." Catherine put on her oven mitts and pulled out the hot tray of chocolate chip cookies from the oven. She turned the oven off before the timer could beep again. Working quickly, she lifted the cookies off the sheet and onto a cooling rack. She cleaned as she went, making sure not to leave any crumbs on the counter or any dirty dishes out. Brendan would be coming home shortly, and she wanted everything to be perfect. She had gone out earlier to buy a large brown rug for the living room and situated it underneath the coffee table. She had seen rugs used in the movies. She was careful to use cash, as she didn't want the purchase on her credit card. Catherine hoped he wouldn't notice the new rug right away, but if he did, she'd just tell him she wanted to spruce the place up a bit, which she rarely ever got to do. Their home was always so clean and welcoming, though. Nothing was ever out of place. Brendan's friends loved coming over here for football Sundays. She would shower them with snacks, beer, and witty commentary as she portrayed herself as the perfect housewife. She checked the clock. 3:44 p.m. He would be getting home in less than half an hour. Her breathing quickened, and her heart starting beating hard against her chest. She'd been meticulously planning this for weeks, and now it was only 20 mins away from happening. If this doesn't work, I'm dead. This needs to work. She had gone to the library and read through too many books to get this wrong. Everything, down to the measurements she needed. And the phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. "Hello?" Catherine slowly picked up the phone on the edge of the counter. She wasn't allowed to have a cell phone, so the only other option was a landline, which sucked because it had no caller ID, so she often had to deal with telemarketers. "Hey, Kat, how are you?" The familiar voice on the other end asked. Her sister was one of the only people in her life that still talked to her. Catherine had slowly pushed everyone else away over the last few years, becoming quite isolated. "Hi, Becca. I'm good. How are you? How's Brian? The kids?" she asked, trying to sound normal and hoping the answers would be quick so that she could get back to preparing for tonight. "We're all great. I hope we can get together soon. It feels like I haven't seen you in ages. We need to go for dinner or drinks soon," Becca exclaimed. She always sounds so bubbly and happy. I wish I could be like that, Catherine thought to herself. Maybe one day soon. Yes, I'd love to. Sorry, I've been so busy lately with work. I just haven't gotten around to seeing anyone. We will hang out soon, though. I promise. This was a lie. Catherine hadn't worked in 3 years, but she'd been lying for so long about it that changing her story now felt impossible. The truth was, she couldn't let her sister see the bruises and cuts that marked her body, the ones that showed up too often and were sometimes too hard to hide. A week ago, one of Catherine's old classmates from college had recognized her when she was at dinner with Brendan. A tall, attractive man she had known only because they had done a couple of group projects together in English class. She did her best to end the conversation quickly, feigning disinterest. But the damage was already done. The drive home that night was silent. But as soon as they got through the front door, Brendan screamed at her, accused her of cheating with this man, whose name she couldn't even remember. "You are such a whore. You open your legs for every man out there, don't you? Am I not good enough for you? Is that it? You think you can do better than me? No, I barely even know him." In between sobs, Catherine had tried to reassure him that nothing was going on. "I haven't spoken to him since college, and nothing ever happened between us." "Bullshit!" His fist hit her in the stomach first. When she keeled over in pain, he pushed her backwards into the wall. She fell onto the floor, and he continued kicking her in the legs, ribs, arms, anywhere but her face. He knew that wasn't so easily covered up like the rest. She put her arms up to protect herself, begging him to stop, and he eventually backed off, only to grab a glass from the cupboard and throw it at the wall just above her head. Before leaving the room, glass rained down, scraping her head and arms. A trickle of blood rolled down from her forehead into the corner of her eye, blurring her vision. This wasn't the worst he'd ever done to her, but it still cut deep. The physical pain stung, but the emotional agony was far worse. How could the person she loved treat her like this? She lay there on the floor for an hour before forcing herself upright and cleaning up the broken glass. Brendan was already asleep, so she showered, bandaged herself up, changed into pajamas, and got into bed beside him, all the while planning her escape. Brendan was used to her forgiving him every time he had one of these episodes. He was very good at manipulating the situation to make her feel like it was all her fault. He would buy her flowers, tell her he didn't mean to hurt her, but that it wouldn't have happened if she hadn't entertained him, been so careless, left such a huge mess for him, etc. She was always the one who ended up apologizing. Little did he know, she had wanted to leave him for months, but was terrified that he may actually kill her if she tried. She was also always a little hopeful that he would change, because she did still love him, as much as she tried not to. After the last 3 times, though, she no longer cared if he changed or not. She needed to get herself out of this permanently. "Kat, you there?" Becca's voice startled her back to the present. "Sorry. Yes, I'm here. Just distracted. Still have so much to do before Brendan gets home. I don't want him to see this mess. Plus, I have to make dinner and do the laundry still. Can I call you tomorrow?" "Yeah, of course." Becca paused. "You know, He could be helping you with some of that too. You shouldn't put so much pressure on yourself. She had never liked Brendan, had tried to convince Catherine not to marry him because she got a bad vibe from him. Too bad Catherine hadn't listened. I know. I'll talk to him. Love you. Bye. Love you too. Catherine hung up the phone and took a deep breath. Bending down, she reached under the sink, behind the garbage can, and pulled out the bottle of cyanide. Again, she poured a tablespoon of it into a teacup, then started boiling some water. She had decided on this method because she had read that it was clean, simple, and often used by housewives with horrible husbands. There would be no messy cleanup, and it was so easy to slip something into his food or drinks without being detected. One thing he did appreciate about her was her cooking skills. She knew her way around a kitchen, and he always ate everything she made. She had mixed in a good amount of cyanide into the cookies, hoping he would eat a lot of them. But just in case, she would also be putting some in his tea, which would be waiting for him on the coffee table when he got home, next to a plate of cookies. If he offered her some, she had planned on her excuse being that she had already eaten one, and that was enough. Brendan liked her skinny, and often commented on how much she ate, so he would understand. Just as she finished mixing the cream and sugar into his tea, she heard the sound of Brendan's tires crunching gravel on the driveway. She looked out the window to see him climbing out of his car. Catherine took one more quick look at everything she had prepared. I think this is it. This either works or it doesn't. He dies or he kills me. Either way, I'll be out of this hell. He came through the door, tossing his briefcase down on the ground. Honey, I'm home. Where's my kiss? Brendan called out. Catherine hurried over, reaching up to give him a quick peck before helping him with his coat. She felt a slight twinge of sorrow as she realized this would likely be their last kiss. But she pushed that thought out of her mind by reminding herself how he has treated her these last few years. He'd isolated her, insulted her, beat her, made her feel like she was worthless, and then made her think everything was her own fault. Fuck him. I made your favorite browned butter chocolate chip cookies. Come have a seat, she offered, putting on a big, fake smile as she hung his coat on the coat rack. Great. I'm starving. I had a rough day at work today, he said, taking a seat on the couch. She noticed he didn't say thank you, as though this kind of greeting was just expected of her and warranted no appreciation. She watched as he took a sip of the Earl Grey cyanide tea and then a bite of one of the cookies. These are delicious. They taste a little different than usual, Brendan said. Yeah, I tried something a little different today. Catherine smiled at him. It's good. Hey, is this a new rug? He finally noticed, taking in the brown, patterned, synthetic fiber rug below his feet. Catherine's heart jumped, but she remained calm. She had prepared for this. Yeah, I saw it today and thought it would look perfect in our living room. And later, you'll look perfect, all rolled up in it, she thought to herself, holding back a smirk. Well, I think a gray rug would have been better. We will have to pick out a nicer one this weekend. Nice effort, though. He finished one cookie and started on another, taking a sip of tea in between. So condescending. I can't wait till he shuts up for good. Okay, baby, she said, turning around and heading into the kitchen so he couldn't see her expression change to annoyance. Catherine pulled the water jug out of the fridge and poured herself a glass. Behind her, she heard Brendan cough and say, "I'm not feeling too well. Did you do something to these?" She turned around in time to watch him vomit on the new carpet and clutch his head. His head must be killing him by now. Headaches and vomiting are some of the first symptoms of cyanide poisoning. He laid his head back on the couch, dazed. I'll have to make sure he doesn't leave any vomit on the couch, too. I really don't feel good. Call an ambulance, he begged, quietly. His body began to shake with convulsions. Seizures were another symptom. Catherine stayed silent, watching as he slowly stopped seizing, and then breathing all together. She quietly took pride in freeing herself from such a monster. Someone who pretended to love her, only to hurt her more deeply than she'd ever been hurt, was truly monstrous in her eyes. She felt a wave of relief wash over her as she mourned the last 5 years of her life. No one should ever have to endure the kind of abuse she had. And now, he could never hurt her or anyone else ever again. Now, all that remained was to get rid of his body. A small smile tugged at her lip as she set to work. Collection day. The hovercraft roared over the tree line, hulking steel against a bruised gray sky. The rotors thrashed, a violent, mechanical pulse, as the collectors, clad in shiny black armor, spilled out onto the cracked earth. Collection Day, Commander Hu sang, his voice crackling through the comm system and echoing through the steel hull. Khufu stood fast and readied his weapon. The door opened with a hiss as early morning sunlight poured inside. "Unload!" Commander Hu called. Their boots thudded and pounded the floor, first steel and then earth, as the villagers beyond cowered behind huts and crates. The collectors burst forth from the hovercraft like terrible ants, busy and bustling. They moved with ruthless efficiency. One yanked a sack of withered potatoes from a woman's trembling hands. Another snatched a clay pot, its contents spilling onto the dust, staining it a muddy brown. Khufu watched, his stomach clenching. This was once his home. None of them knew that, of course. When you joined the collectors, any life you once had was washed away like soot in the rain. He'd been on more than a dozen of these runs, more than a dozen collection days, each of them vicious, but none like this. Then he saw her. Willow. She stood apart, her chin lifted in a gesture of defiance he remembered so well. Even after all this time, the fire in her eyes was unmistakable. It was Willow, unbent, unbeaten, untamed. Thunder crashed in the distance as a wave of memories crashed over him. It was a collection day, like this one, many years ago. The sun beat down on their bare backs as the two of them, scrawny saplings in a field of oaks, snuck through the tall grass. Mrs. Rosen had fallen ill, so they had hidden away a few armfuls of food and medicine, and were determined to find a place to hide before the hovercraft left. Willow had a knack for hiding. She was always the last caught in hide and seek. But on this day, something gave them away. Perhaps the swaying of the grass as they crawled through it. "Who's there?" A collector's shout, sharp as a blade, shattered the quiet. Fear, cold and slick, slid down Khufu's spine. He glanced at Willow, her eyes wide and dark. He pressed a finger to his lips. "Shh," he breathed silently. Then he stood up, his arms raised. "I'm sorry, sir. It's my aunt. She's sick." "Come here," the collector barked. Khufu stepped forward carefully as Willow crouched frozen. There were some words exchanged, but Khufu could never recall them. Collectors did not permit explanations or negotiations. They dealt only in force. They pummeled him, each blow a dull thud against his ribs, his back, his skull. Then, as he blood mixed with the dirt beneath him, they gathered the food and medicine and marched away. But Willow, hidden amongst the stalks, was safe. "She's a feisty one," a collector crackled. Khufu stared back at him as a light rain began tapping on their helmets. Willow, cornered, lashed out. Her small fist connected with a collector's arm, a surprising show of strength. The other collectors swarmed her. One grabbed her arms from behind as another lifted his weapon, ready to strike her. But Willow reared back like a bucking horse and kicked hard, her foot cracking his visor. He dropped his rifle and staggered back. "Enough," a deep voice sounded. Commander Hu approached, the red cape of his rank swimming behind him. "What's going on here?" "The girl is resistant," a collector reported. Hu studied her for a moment. Another cry of thunder roared out as the rain fell harder. Hu's cape billowed as he turned on his heel. "Execute her," Hu said, his voice flat. He looked at Khufu. "You do it." Khufu's heart hammered against his ribs. Feeling his hands tremble, he quickly stood straight and nodded. He walked toward Willow, each step heavy. He saw the fear in her eyes, the desperate plea, felt the mud squelch beneath his boots. "It's you," she whimpered, her voice soft and raspy. Khufu squared himself toward her and watched her eyes fill with tears. "Khufu," she said. Without moving his head, he glanced left and right. She had used his name, a name unknown to any of the others. "Do it quickly," Commander Hu said. He took a deep breath, then another. There were 10 of them in total. Of the villagers, there were at least 50, maybe more. They were weak, but their strength together could be formidable. If he turned his gun on his commander, then perhaps the other villagers would seize the opportunity. He looked at the villagers. He saw old man Tiber, his face a mask of grief. He saw the fear in the children's eyes. He saw the collectors, their faces blank, black pools of nothingness shining in the rain. He thought of his new home in the gleaming city in the distance, built on the backs of people like this, his people. He thought of the comfortable life he had, the life he'd purchased with his silence, his willingness to join his oppressors. One more deep breath. He raises his rifle and squeezes the trigger. The shot rings out, and the rain freezes. Hu staggers back, his hand clutching his chest. He takes a few clumsy steps, and then collapses. The wind whistles through the village and sizzles in the gripping silence. Then chaos erupts. Collectors turn, weapons raised. Khufu looks to Willow. "Run," he says. He then aims and shoots at the closest collector. Then another, and another. All 3 of them fall, but he feels a sharp bite in his shoulder, and his arm goes limp. He dives toward a vegetable stand and takes cover. Cabbages explode around him, and voices shout, mixing together like dense fog. Khufu lifts his rifle atop a nearby barrel and aims, his other arm still hanging lifelessly at his side. To his delight, at least 20 villagers, including Willow, have overtaken the remaining collectors. He stands and looks around. 4 are dead, the rest disarmed. They have done it. Willow turns, and their eyes lock. The sun finally crawls out and reaches down as if to embrace them. "Khufu," she calls, a light of hope in her eyes. She begins to run toward him, her arms outstretched. He reaches for her. "Do it quickly," I said. It was Commander Hu. Khufu's eyes went wide. He shook the driving rain from his visor. "Yes, sir." "Khufu, please," Willow screamed, her face flooded with tears. He raised a hand to his lips. "Shh," he said, trying to calm her. But the promise felt like ash in his mouth. He opened his eyes and squeezed the trigger. The awful sound rings out and echoes like laughter amidst the booming thunder. Willow's body slumped to the ground. A hand clasped Khufu's shoulders. "Well done," Commander Hu said. "Now load up." A price to pay. I should have known better. As cliché as it sounds, nothing in life is ever free. It all started with my dream trip. We were bouncing down the streets in the French Quarter to the tune of live horns blaring and drums pounding, forcing this mystical string of rhythm that shivered up from my toes to my hips. I had over-elaborated in mixed spirits with colors of red, orange, and green, doused in crushed ice. I had saved up an entire year for 3 whole days of fun. The ultimate girl trip. Now here I was, trapped in this padded room, all by my lonesome. It's better this way for everyone, at least in my opinion. Now back to how I got here. I digress. I promise it will make sense later on. Anyways, we were partying with all the other thrill seekers. The weather was perfect. I mean, it was hot, but that's what you want in July in New Orleans. Hot, humid, and rainless. Everybody was spreading Southern love. Gold, silver, purple, and green beaded necklaces rained down like candy from a kid's pinata. It didn't matter if you raised your top or not. The love for tourists was overflowing. The street vendors were making their rounds as well, so quick and elegant, with the words that rolled off their tongue. It was like they were singing you a nighttime lullaby, weaving a spell of sweet nothings and joy. Little did I know, that is exactly what they were doing. I have never thought of myself as an overly superstitious person. I say overly because I did avoid having my feet swept and never opened an umbrella in a building or house. Outside of that, a black cat was just a black cat. I didn't believe in witches, shamans, witch doctors, or black magic. I understood the undertones of voodooism in the bayous of Louisiana. I took a mythology class during my undergraduate studies. I even did a research paper on it. I knew a good story when I heard one. And that is exactly what they were. Stories. I digress. My attention was drawn to a street vendor that had his face painted in gold. He had on a jester hat decorated in colors of purple and silver. He had on a purple blazer with purple dress pants to match. His feet were nestled into pointed green boots trimmed with white. He had multiple beaded necklaces going down his left arm and was shooting confetti out of a wooden pipe that resembled some type of flute or oboe. I made my way closer to capture a video. The vibes from that one was something magical. It was 90 degrees, and he wasn't sweating. That should have been my first clue. Something was off. People were passing by, pointing and laughing. I got closer, but still was far enough away that I looked as if I was just a part of the crowd celebrating on Bourbon Street. He placed the pipe down on a little box as an elderly couple stopped to admire his painted face and outfit. He tried to hand the woman the necklaces on his arm, and her husband, I assume, shook his head no. The guy was like 6 feet tall, but did the daintiest curtsy. I had every scene, and I couldn't contain my giggle. Neither could the couple, and the man accepted the beads. When the couple tried to give the beads back to the court jester, he shook his head no and put his hands up to signal 20. The husband tried to give them back again. The jester took 3 of the beaded necklaces back and then put up one hand to now signal Pash as the total. His wife laughed beside him. I mean, I get the humor. What better place to get swindled than the streets of New Orleans, baby? Memories to keep for a lifetime. He gave the hustler the money, and then they bounced down the street. I had recorded the entire scene on my phone, and when I looked up, we had made eye contact. I felt almost locked in his trance. The beginning of my demise. I looked down at the stupid, tarnished rose gold ring with the blue opal stone that was now trapped on my finger. Sorry, there I go again, jumping around the story. Again, we locked eyes. I was more than a little tipsy and had the audacity to wink and giggle. He put his confetti flute back to his mouth and blew in my direction. He wasn't going to hustle me, and that was for sure. I know how it works. The group I was with shifted, and somehow we got closer to him and his show. This time when he blew, confetti made it onto my shirt. He had a cheering audience now. The air smelled of booze, sweat, and cigarette smoke, mingled with hints of too strong cologne here and there. But that did nothing to deter the crowd. He presented a new sleeve of beaded necklaces in multiple colors. The flute pipe went back to the box. People were so drunk that they were totally fine with paying primes for necklaces you could get from the nearest dollar store. But not me. They were being thrown from balconies for free. I couldn't hide the skepticism from my eyes. I loved the camaraderie, but no scams will empty my pockets this day. He locked his eyes with mine again, and then moved towards me. This time, he grabbed my hand and twirled me around in a circle to the beat of the live music that was playing in the streets. My cheeks were aching from smiling so hard, but I was not going to fall for his swindle. My friends were cheering me on in the background, happy that I was finally letting my hair down. I was a little dizzy from the alcohol and the spinning. The jester then enclosed my hand in both of his And when he pulled back, there was a ring on my finger. I don't know how he did it, but I wasn't paying for it. "Take it back!" I screamed over the music and noisy patrons. He shook his head no and put up his hand to indicate $25. I laughed and repeated myself. He changed it to $15. His light brown eyes seemed amused by my defiance to be swayed to part with my hard-earned money for a ring I could have gotten from a bubblegum machine. To be honest, I had already been hustled when I went to the marketplace the day before and paid $75 for an ugly dress because I was sold a dream. He went down to $10, and he almost had me until a lady behind me said that she would buy it for $25. I tried to take it off my finger to give it back, but he stopped me and gave me a huge smile. His teeth were about the prettiest I had ever seen, complementing his gold-painted skin. He really looked like he was out of a painting. He had a broad nose, and he had a set of long lashes that any woman would be jealous of. A handsome fellow, he definitely was. Again, not a bead of sweat, and his skin was flawless. He nodded, and then pressed his lips to the back of my ringed hand before shaking his head at the woman, and spoke. "This here trinket is for the one who doubts the ways of the bayou. She has been chosen," and then gave her a beaded necklace instead. I felt a flush of heat go over my entire body. The accent made it sound so poetic. Everyone continued to cheer him on until all the necklaces were gone. And then that was that. Or so I thought. He turned back to me and winked. As we all dispersed, my party and I made our way down to the end of Bourbon Street. And when it was time to go back up, I tried to take the ring off my finger to give it back, but I couldn't get it off. In theory, the good things, when we came back to his area of business, he was gone. Little did I realize then that he meant what he said when I was chosen. All that was left in his spot was an empty box and pieces of confetti that littered where he once stood. No matter how many times I replayed it in my mind, I still can't figure out the pivotal moment when I chose my fate. Or better yet, my fate was chosen for me. Why me? No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get this stupid ring to come off. At the time, I thought it was all of the salty food and alcohol I consumed on the trip. But when we made it back home, it was still glued to my ring finger. Of all the fingers he could have put it on, it had to be the one that indicated I was taken out of the marital market. Like I said before, I have never been an overly superstitious person. My beliefs are my beliefs. When the first dream hit me, I thought it was just a coincidence. I had a dream that I was drowning. The golden man with the perfect teeth was looking down at me from a black boat, smiling. Instead of beaded necklaces on his arm, he was holding a funeral wreath with a name I recognized on it. The odds, right? Or at least, that is what I thought, until 3 months later, the person actually passed away in a boating accident. The dreams continued. Vivid nightmares of people I know perishing to the other side. Every dream turned into some kind of forewarning of what was to come. Always him. Always a new funeral wreath. Always the smile. The creep worked some kind of black magic on me when he gave me his ring. I tried telling my friends and family that we were entertained the Grim Reaper himself, and he was punishing me with these visions because I wouldn't fall for his con. Everything has a price, even entertainment. I didn't even know I was giving up anything. I guess I got swindled after all. The group that went with me had no recollection of the gold-painted man with a jester hat on his head. What they did remember is me getting into a rather large argument with a stranger about the origins of voodoo, and screaming that the natives of New Orleans' beliefs are based loosely on fairy tales, and that I apparently offended a lot of people. Even if that was the case, no one could tell me how the ring came to be on my finger. The video that I thought I had recorded when he was hustling the elderly couple had disappeared from my phone. The first professional I saw for the prophetic dreams told me I worked too hard, and maybe I needed to take some time off and stay away from alcohol. They had me complete all these different tests to prove that I was in my right mental state. In the midst of it, no one could get this stupid ring off my finger. By the time I got to the fight professional, I was told that maybe I should just keep my intrusive thoughts to myself. And death was a part of life, and try to live in a normal manner. I see death. I don't want to see it, but I still was able to see it all the same. I was cursed by a New Orleans jester, all because of the difference of opinions. If only I could go back, I would have definitely said no to that first drink and kept a clear head the entire, instead of being doomed to a room of padded walls because everyone thinks I lost my mind. Here I was, safe. But let's go back to the beginning. Clock is a tickin'. Freeze, jabroni. Don't make a move. Carl almost burst out laughing until he turned around and saw the camouflage gear-festooned, rodent-faced man pointing what could only be a large-caliber handgun directly at him. I told you don't make a move. Now turn around and put your hands behind your back, shrilled the man with the gun. Carl, a tall, thin, balding man with blue eyes, was no longer in a laughing mood. In fact, a sense of ice-cold terror was trickling down his spine. He'd never had a gun pointed at him before. Teetering on the edge of panic, Carl asked the armed man, "Just to be clear, do you want me to freeze and remain still, or turn around and place my arms behind my Shut up, jabroni. Just do what you're told, and nobody gets hurt, barked the gunman. But Carl saw a cloud of confusion pass over the man's rat-like face. Immediately, Carl instinctively knew the man had never pointed a gun at anyone before, and that knowledge placed them on a level playing field, at least to a certain extent. Hey, look, man, I don't have any problems with you, Carl said as calmly as he could. I'm just here. Look, my wife got me a new tarp for our trailer for Christmas, and I'm just here to strip off the old tarp and throw the new one on. Who are you, anyway? Carl's trailer was parked next to the Skookumchuck River in a remote, rural area of Washington State. Beautiful in the summer, but right now, it was December 27th, and freezing rain was dripping from the slate gray sky onto the small collection of aging recreational vehicles parked along the muddy banks of the Skookumchuck. I got no problems with you either, provided you're not a Fed. Now show me some ID. The armed man was still barking orders, but it was clear that the burst of adrenaline was waning, and his voice had lost its threatening edge. Quit pointing that gun at me, and let me get my driver's license, okay? What's your name, anyway? And what are you doing here? Carl said, as he showed the man his Oregon driver's license. You went across state lines, huh? Not a bad idea. Well, shit. I guess we gotta stick together in desperate times anyways, don't we? The name's Victor, but you can call me Vic. Damn nice to meet you, Carl. Sorry I was less than welcoming, but you know how it is. Vic said, tucking his pistol into his pants and drawing the back of his hand across his nose before offering Carl a manly handshake. This here's my trailer, Vic said, casting his head toward an RV about 20 feet from Carl's. Well, technically, it belongs to my Uncle Kevin, but he's too damn old and doesn't truly appreciate the magnitude of the threat. Carl took a deep breath. Suddenly, he felt somewhat restored to his equilibrium. He knew Kevin. Shit. Carl had been parking his trailer in these woods for about 16 years. He was at least casually acquainted with the other campers and fishermen who frequented the site. As Carl internalized the vital information that Vic wasn't just some random lunatic or escaped convict, he said, "Holy hell, Vic. I know old Kev. Known him for years. Wait, the magnitude of... What is this threat you're referring to?" Vic went still, and his hand wandered to his waistband, where the gun was tucked away. He gave Carl a skeptical stare, and then silently assessed their surroundings. The gentle roar of the river was a backdrop for the occasional chirp of a bird. But otherwise, all was silent. Vic's eyes flickered up into the evergreens and peered into the underbrush, but nothing moved. There was no breeze, and the rain was just a mist that hung in the air, along with the scent of moss. Carl belatedly realized that Vic had been out in the woods for a while. His jawline was scruffy, and the pores on his nose were black and visible. Dirt was caked under his fingernails, and his hair was stingy and greasy. "What threat?" Vic hissed. "You playing games with me, Carl? Because you wouldn't be out here if you weren't keyed in, and I don't appreciate being toyed with. No. That's not what I meant. Listen, I'm just trying to understand your assessment of the threat, Vic. We need to share intel if we are gonna get a handle on the... Shit, man. You want some beef jerky? Carl asked as he yanked a packet of Jack Links out of his pocket and tore it open. Vic accepted a hunk of jerky and gestured that Carl would follow him to his trailer. After about a dozen steps, Vic stopped in his tracks and surveilled the tree line for snipers. But soon enough, they were ensconced in the comfy confines of the almond beige wood paneling in old Kev's RV, chewing jerky and discussing strategy. Soundgarden issued softly from the tape deck as Vic chuckled and said, "Leave it to the computer nerds to completely disregard the obvious fact that we are gonna run out of digits. Goddamn educated idiots is what I call hello?" Vic could do a pretty accurate Jerry Seinfeld impression. "Sweet fancy Moses. Yeah, but what'll happen? What's gonna happen when the clock strikes midnight on New Year's Eve?" Carl asked, and Vic just shook his head and said, "Boom. Digital apocalypse. We run out of digits. Think about it. Our entire lives, ever since the invention of computers, we've been running on 2 digits. Wait, what?" Carl said. "There are shitloads of digits, like 8 or 9 at least." "Let me ask you this," Vic said, leaning forward. "What year did you graduate high school?" "Class of 94, Carl said. "And the year you were born?" Vic insisted, leaning closer. 75. "What's your point?" Carl said, confused. "My point? My point?" Vic said, locking Carl in his beady gaze. "My point is that when we go from 99 to 2000, boom, digital apocalypse, brah. Nobody has ever thought of the consequences. There are no guardrails in place, no safety net, Carl. Think about it." Realization dawned on Carl as he said, "Vic, how the fuck did you figure all this out? Do you work for the CIA or something?" Vic just chuckled and slowly shook his head. "Ever heard of dial-up internet jabroni? My parents have it in my dad's office in the basement. Let's just say it's not just for email and porn anymore. I've done my own research." "Fuck," Carl muttered, collapsing back into his chair. "Do you think my ATM card will stop working?" "I'm afraid it's much worse than that, amigo," Vic whispered. "It's effectively a Mayan calendar scenario. The end is upon us, and we are gonna need to be prepared." The fucking Mayan calendar?" Carl, suddenly animated, exclaimed as he threw his truck keys to Vic. "All hands on deck, Vic. You are the wheelman. I'll watch your six. We need to get down to the 7-Eleven before dark, fuel up the rig, and load up on ammunition. 10-4. Carl!" Vic said over his shoulder, but he skittered to a stop just before they reached the truck, grabbed Carl by the front of his jacket, and said, "We are gonna need a lot more of this jerky, Carl. We need to sequester as many more packs of Jack Links as we can. Do you read me? I read you loud and clear, good buddy. Now let's get to gettin'. Clock is tickin', jabroni. Clock is a tickin'. Bread, tea, life. A steaming loaf of bread. For the last year, Marco, a UX designer by profession and a baker by hobby, has been fighting forgetfulness. Not sure how it started. Maybe there was a medical reason. He'd lay in bed thinking a tumor was cooking in the corner of his brain, slowly degenerating his memory, closer to a stroke with each day. He didn't even know if brain tumors and strokes had to do anything with one another. He just knew both were bad and didn't want to know more. Or maybe it was all due to alcohol and cigarettes in his younger years. He used to drink and smoke heavily until the bad habits caught up with him at his friend's wedding 3 years ago. He woke up with a hangover, but it was a different type of hangover. His head felt like a malfunctioned computer that worked at 50% of its capabilities. His mind would turn on and off as he was waiting for breakfast. Then, after a fourth time going to breakfast to douse his face in cold water, his brain turned on entirely. He could almost feel the full power of consciousness kicking in. The probability that it might not happen next time scared him. Or maybe it was due to that tick bite he got 2 years ago. 2 weeks later, it turned out he had Lyme disease. It was discovered early, and he drank antibiotics. But you never know. Or maybe, actually most likely, it was because the sorry excuse for a human that was his wife was driving him crazy. Constantly nagging, never was everything fine, always something wrong. And it was him that needed fixing, never her. Or if she needed fixing, it was because of something he had done, even when what he was doing was good. For example, back when he didn't have a sustainable income, life was bad because she was carrying the financial weight. Then, when the tables turned and he became the one bringing in the money, life was bad because she felt useless. Then, all the diseases. One day, it's breast cancer. Then it's leukemia, only to be suspicious of an unknown bone disease. Next, the mental issues. Bipolarity, anxiety, panic attacks, depression. Marco had no problem with any of those. He was there to help. What ticked him off was the nerve to complain about his behavior when he had a bad week. It was understandable if she was in a rut, but God forgive, if it was the other way around. Then, he was a selfish and cold-blooded bastard. All of that was the reason for his panic attacks. Marco has never had them before as long as he could remember. Then, he'd get sudden panic attacks while waiting for her to finish her shopping or while on a bus. It would happen out of the blue. He'd have a perfect day, then a sudden surge in the brain and panic. The result was panicking about a possible next panic attack. He couldn't remember if this was before or after his friend's wedding. It was a long time ago. Too many events to remember the exact time. Finally, the tea. The apartment was full of tea. Green tea, black tea, Earl Grey, matcha, chamomile, desert delight, 1001 nights, the Gauss flights. All these general and random names. And okay, it was fine. Nothing wrong with someone enjoying tea. But she'd buy one. God knows it would be outside her budget. Drink it once, and then leave it in the cupboard. Like a lunatic collector. But instead of LP records, it was tea. Anyways, Marco stopped for a second. What was he doing again? It was always like this. He'd be doing one thing, start thinking about her the next, get angry, and then forget about closing the fridge door. He looked at the still hot loaf of bread. He took the knife and cut into it. Steam was dancing from it and mixing with the kitchen. A perfect concoction of tasteless air and oven-fresh pleasantness. Then he looked at a small bottle next to it. Was he really going to poison her? What a crazy thought. He still couldn't believe how he managed to get his hands on the poison. The poison needed to have no flavor. He didn't want to jeopardize the bread, but could he do it? Now that the moment has arrived, could he kill? No. Could he kill another person? His wife, out of all people. He wasn't that type of person. The ones you read about in the news, they are always ugly, weird, and either too thin or too fat. He wasn't that. He liked people, and people liked him. Unlike the fat and the thin, he had a reason. She brought him to this point. He'd never do it for pleasure. His action was justifiable. He cut 2 pieces of bread and put them on a plate. He opened the fridge and took some ham and cheese. Next, he cut both ham, cheese, into fine finger food pieces and decorated them next to the bread. The fridge light helped him see better. He picked up the plate, took a deep breath, and walked towards the living room. He stopped. Wait. Did he put the poison in the dough before baking the bread? He remembered pondering whether to lace the bread before or after. It made sense to do it before. But what if the heat neutralized the poison? Unlikely, but it could happen. He should have used more than a few drops. What's the worst that could happen if he didn't? He chuckled. She'd die even more? Huh. Snap out of it, Marco. Did you put the poison or not? He grabbed the bottle and brought it to his eye level. He jigged the small brown bottle to see if there was less poison than before. No idea. He pulled the cork and smelled the poison. No smell. What was he expecting? Damn fridge. Always forget to close it. Marco slammed the fridge door. What to do? What to do? Maybe he should roll with it. And if it works, it works. If not, he'll try again. No. That means he'd have to hide the poison somewhere in the apartment until the opportunity arrives. He couldn't live with the stress. Not with all the cleaning she does every single day. Bake another bread? But what if she arrives while he's baking the second bread, and the first bread is already on the table? How would he explain that? His gaze stopped at the tea cupboard. He grabbed the chamomile, mint, lavender, rosemary, and clove mix, turned on the stove to boil water. 250 milliliters exactly. He shoved a teaspoon into the mix and combined it with water. Then he waited for 5 minutes. The tea was ready. Just don't forget. Pebble, rain pattered against glass. Burnt beans overtook the scent of fresh bread. Voices overlapped as stories were shared and gossip was spilled. The game played on the TV. We were winning. The buzz in the air was almost intoxicating. Even the rain couldn't dull it. Gray stared at the brown liquid. Steam rose, collecting into beads of sweat as his face hovered over the cream-colored mug. Blonde curls, curtained, flushed skin, and bleeding lips as his teeth pulled at the delicate skin. He was in his own air. The buzz flowed around him. His ears were stuffed with the nectar of the past. It seeped out, dripped down his arm, burned through his skin, revealing scars that were hidden with years of neglect. Nails cracked as he dug into the wooden table. His mind swirled. The nectar was thick. It was creeping through the crevices of his head, consuming thoughts he pushed down and forcing him to face it. Metal filled his mouth as Gray bit down harder on his lips. Pain filled his face, and the sob got stuck in his throat. Taking a deep breath, he picked up the mug and took a sip of the bitter liquid. It stung at his bruised lips, but the taste was welcome. A deep breath led to long sigh, releasing tension as he slumped over the table. Pebble? He clenched his eyes closed as his mind flooded. The bricks of the dam slammed and slammed against the limit of his conscious as the memories flooded over him. Gray scrambled across the sticky ground. He gripped at the blood-soaked hoodie, pulling the small body into his arms. His fingers left trails, as he rubbed at the bruised skin, hoping his touch would wake him up. Pebble, come on. What he thought was a yell was nothing more than a cracked whisper. Shaking hands gripped at curls that were just like his, just a bit brighter in color. He just kept repeating himself, holding the one good thing in his world, rocking him back and forth like he had to do to help him fall asleep just a couple years ago. A few feet away, smoke rose from the 5th cigarette lit today. It found its home between cracked lips. Lips that never once said anything that portrayed an ounce of care. Those lips belonged to a woman of dirty beauty. Beautiful blonde curls that have been passed along for generations framed a pretty pale face that was stressed by a chosen sickness. She stared at the scene, the bodies that were her offspring, at least by the doctor's words. But just 'cause the doctor said it doesn't mean she cares for it. The law forces her hand, forces her to obey her parental expectations, but it can't make her look at them with anything but an icy indifference. That indifference made her not care when they cried, when they needed to be held, when they needed someone to praise them, when they won, and support them when they fell. That is why, when her youngest was beaten with vase after vase until the glass shards impaled him because he whined too much, she didn't move a muscle. One less expense. Tears were dripping into his coffee, little splatters staining his clenched hands. He took one and bit on it, holding inside his screams as what happened just a few hours ago replayed. Stepping inside the decade-old home, the wood creaking with every step, the excitement he felt with Deku swinging in his pocket, imagining the look on Pebble's face as he held his favorite character in his hands. Then the way his soul dropped into the pit of his stomach. How his vision blurred until the only thing he could see was his little brother laying on the smoke-infested rug, his blood making it an even darker shade of black. The glass fractures, creating a mosaic of different colors that flickered in the light of the dusty swing lamp. Knots formed at the bottom of Gray's stomach. It burned. It hurt. The more he pushed it away, the more it forced itself forward. Their mother sitting there, watching, dusting the ashes off her pants. Their father's snores, traveling from down the hall. He bit into his skin until it split. Luckily, his shirt was black. No one could see the blood that was making it stick to his chest. Just the dirt that's layered on top of it. He couldn't leave his brother laying there. Someone had to bury him. Someone tapped him on the shoulder. Gray turned his head, blood trailing down his chin. "Are you okay, honey?" It was a middle-aged lady. Her hair was thrown into a tight ponytail that made her sharp features pop out even more. He licked his sore lips. Looking down, he had bit into the white meat of his hand. Blood trickled down his skin and dripped onto the table. Puffy eyes, blood-tinted skin and lips, dirt-stained clothes. Gray knew he looked a mess, swallowing his answer. His voice probably wasn't going to work anyway. He grabbed his coffee mug and walked right past her. Curious eyes probed at him as he walked towards the glass doors. Someone behind him was asking him to wait. But he didn't listen, or he couldn't hear. Either way, he walked straight into storm, the rain soaking his body in just a few minutes. Puddles splashed, cars honked, wet grass coated abused shoes. Gray let his feet lead the way. They brought him to the park. It was empty, of course. He climbed onto the playground, crawling his way into the little tunnel, the one place that was still dry. Somehow, he was still holding on to the mug. He took a sip. It tasted like brown water in the tube, surrounded by the rain cascading down. He let himself cascade. Sobs spilled out until his whole body shook. His hands not able to find the right place to stay. He kept trying to stick them in his pockets, but then he remembered Deku wasn't there. It was tight in Pebble's hand. He gripped his hair, his scalp protesting. His mother's nonchalant figure, his father's peaceful rest, Pebble's warm body lying there, still. It lit something in him. Everything he was holding inside, all that he kept hidden, to keep a smile on his little brother's face, all he dealt with to protect him, everything he never gained that he gave. His sobs trailed off into a coughing spill. His mind broke. The pain spilled over, the cuts, the bruises, the memories. The mug cracked in his tightening grip, his shaking hands from the cold, or his anger he didn't know. With a crack, the mug spilled into his lap, and a deafening scream spilled from his lips. The force bruising his already sore throat. It filled the tube. The storm swallowed it, taking his pain into its grasp as his vision blurred with red. Storm Emmett, TW Death of Humans and Animals. Storm Emmett, from her elevated position in her fishmonger shop, Kellen could oversee the town, the harbor, and the storm beyond. She pressed Pa's binoculars against the shop's rear window and studied the waves in the English Channel, churning as though they were being stirred within a giant cauldron. Darkened clouds blotted out the sun, giving the impression that it was night rather than the middle of the afternoon. A lone fishing trawler plowed into a gray wave in a desperate attempt to reach the shelter of the harbor. The lights of the vessel flicking in and out of view. Feeling a pang of pity for the crew of the trawler, Kaylin turned her attention to the harbor. The beach was invisible, submerged beneath the waterline. The storm ripped a garish flag, depicting a cartoon sun wearing sunglasses, free from the ice cream kiosk on the seawall, and tossed it into a breaking wave. The few vessels in harbor, with any exposed fabric rippling in the wind, strained at their mooring lines as the trawler rounded the seawall and entered the limited safety of the harbor. Kaylin glanced over her childhood home. So far, the storm had stripped most of the aerials from their rooftops and had collapsed half a dozen chimneys. But there would be worse to come. She could remember when Port Carrick had been a quaint fishing village, most well known for its natural harbor, and later its Victorian lighthouse. She glanced at the lighthouse, now considered a Grade 2 listed building, as the ship skirted by its base, and wondered what the Victorians and the generations before them would have thought about this storm. Kellen glanced out the shop window and at the cobbled street that wound its way down to the harbor, decided it was unlikely she would receive any customers, and bolted the door. Although she had become nose blind to the smell of the fish, she had yet to grow used to the countless, lifeless eyes watching her from shelves of ice. She failed to suppress a shiver. A warm shower would raise her spirits and provide an excuse to return to her novel afterwards. Something rapped at the door. Kellen jumped. A yellow mass that looked pixelated behind the frosted glass peered inside. "Hello? Who is it?" The figure was wearing a yellow Macintosh, and something gray was protruding from their face. The owner of the coat was stooped over, casting a shadow through the glass. "Hello?" she said again. The figure rapped on the door with a gloved hand. Kellen heard the person speak, but their words were lost to the wind. Their Cornish accent, however, was unmistakable. "Ernest, is that you?" Kellen unbolted the door. Ernest stumbled inside, his rain-sodden boots leaving puddles on the floor. "Christ, you kept me out there for long enough, didn't you?" he muttered as he lowered his hood. Kellen spotted rainwater dribbling from the man's beard. "Couldn't see who it was," she answered, closing the door. Ernest unzipped his coat, and Kellen saw he had failed to change out of his fishing overalls. They clung to him like a second skin. "Were you up on the coastal path? Or was that you coming back into the harbor just now?" Kellen asked. Ernest mopped his face and offered her a toothless smile. As he did so, Kellen glimpsed the Ernest she knew. Growing up, the smiling man telling stories on the harbor side. Now his smile seemed forced, almost desperate. "We were fishing. It isn't safe." "Is it safe to go out in that?" Kellen asked, turning the thought, spoken by the voice of her pa, into a question. "We've been out in worse," Ernest said. Kellen decided not to question this lie. "Can't imagine you caught much in this weather." They were saying on the news that the storm keeps growing over Cornwall. "No end in sight," they said. "We caught plenty. I've never known us to be so lucky before. The fish must love the weather. Best haul we've had in years. Actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about." He held up an object wrapped in brown paper. I wanted to show you this before it goes to market tomorrow. She watched as Ernest placed the package onto the counter and began to unwrap it. Cod, he announced, and stepped away. Kellen examined the fish. Its mouth was ajar. Its dull silver skin was flecked with tints of orange. Right, she said. It'll go lovely with chips, I'm sure. What's... It has fangs. What? Look. Ernest stuck his index finger into the fish's mouth and peeled back the lips. 2 teeth. So large, Kalen could have called them tusks, protruded from the fish's lower jaw. She failed to suppress a gasp. It looks like a vampire, Ernest said, with a dry chuckle. What's caused that then? Dunno. Might be a freak of nature. Vampire cod. Is there such a thing? Anyway, I wanted you to see it. That's all. Unless you want it. Kellen considered this, but the fish would only be useful as a party piece. Not that she attended any of those. No, she said. Keep it. Put it with the rest of your catch. Or better yet, have it for your supper. Clearly disappointed, he hadn't raised as much excitement as he had hoped. Kellen watched Ernest wrap up the fish as though it were a Christmas present. You coming down to the market tomorrow morning, buying your wares? Yeah, Kellen said, before the Emmets get out of bed. Mind you, Storm's keeping most of those away, anyway. Like rats, Ernest said, zipping up his coat. Plague rats. Or leeches. Coming down from London and the like. No, don't you tut. Your pa would agree with me. They're bloody running us out of our own home. Kellen wasn't sure if the remark had been aimed at her, but knew her pa wouldn't have agreed. He had loved the tourists, the lifeblood of Cornwall he had called them, and would often preach that without them, the county wouldn't be as prosperous as it was now. It had been his idea, although he hadn't had time to implement it, to send the fish to London via train rather than selling them locally. It was essential to keep the shop afloat. She wondered what he would think of the storm. I'll see you tomorrow, Kalen said, before Ernest could speak, and closed the door behind him. Kellen woke the following morning exhausted. The storm was anything but. On her walk down to the market, she was surprised to find that her shop had remained undamaged, while the rest of the village had not been so lucky. Both the primary school and New Town Hall had been struck by lightning, leaving blackened, scorched marks on their roofs. More chimneys had been felled, in addition to several dozen roof tiles. The content of the village's drains had spilled out onto the streets. 2 builders were arguing at the base of the lighthouse, beside a van containing building supplies, their argument turning into a brawl as she passed. Kellen hurried on after learning Ernest had already left for another day's fishing and placing her order. She returned to her shop and continued her novel until she spotted a yellow figure hurrying up the hill that evening, hood lowered against the rain. Got another one, Ernest cheered as he entered. Kellen placed her book onto the counter. Another what? Cod with fangs? No, but similar. Ernest opened the brown parcel in his hand and dropped something that looked like congealed jelly onto the counter with a splat. Kellen snatched up her novel. "Is that a squid?" she asked, studying the array of tentacles. "An octopus," Ernest beamed. Kellen stared at the dead creature. Its bulbous head swayed from side to side, like a king cobra. Tentacles lay out in every direction across the counter, which was now covered in a layer of salt water and ink. Kellen poked at one of the lifeless suckers. "It's wrong," her pa's voice said. "Unnatural. You don't get octopuses off Cornwall," she said. "You do sometimes. Very rare, though, and never this big. But look, it has an extra arm." "What?" Kalen counted. "Oh my God, a 9-armed octopus," she muttered. "I've never seen the like." "Wrong," her pa's voice said again, filled with a sudden sense of revulsion. Kellen took a step away from the counter. "It's that storm," Ernest said. "It's brought all sorts in. We're making a killing out there." As he spoke, Kalen heard a distant crash and felt the ground tremble. She suspected that a tree had blown over on the coastal path. "Did you hear that?" But Ernest hadn't seemed to have noticed. "I might donate it to the RNLI station, see if they want it on display. Or the new town hall, maybe? If there's anything of it left standing after the storm. I saw the bloody mayor having a right go at some of the repairmen just now. Proper waving and shouting, he was. The builders were going on about some Celtic graves they were told to dig over or something. Should have called in some specialist, they were saying. I don't know. Anyway, we brought some more fish in, me and the men. We're going to do a night fishing trip, so there might be more fish for you to buy tomorrow. Unless, of course, you want to send it up to those fancy hotels in London. That's what they're saying down in the market. That we're not good enough for you. That's where the money is, Kaylin explained. But Ernest had started ranting again. Your pa, if he could see you now, would be disgusted. Do you know that, girl? He would have been sick. Although Kellen had spent her childhood in this building, she had never worked in it. Now she wished she had paid more attention when Pa was discussing margins and cost-cutting measures. He died. She had returned from London, discovered she had inherited the shop, and felt the weight of his legacy land across her shoulders. It was his idea, Kaylin began. A traitor against your own home, running up to London. Listen, Ernest, I don't want your octo. Ernest snatched up the dead creature, bundled it back into the parcel, and fled the shop. Kellen, wondering if storms could affect human behavior in the same way it could affect animals, bolted the door behind him. Just in case, when Kaylin opened the shop the next morning, she saw that the cobble street outside had been transformed into a miniature river. A brown torrent of water washed its way down the coastal path, round the street, and disappeared towards the harbor. Hurrying up the flooded street, waving his arms, was Ernest. Swearing, Kaylin snatched up her coat and left the shelter of her shop. "What are you doing?" she shouted, as Ernest continued to stagger towards her, his arms spinning to to maintain his balance. She felt the rain penetrate her shirt and shivered as droplets ran down her spine. If you fall, you'll be washed away. Beach, Ernest answered, pointing down to the harbor. What? Ernest's mouth moved, but only half the sentence reached her. Washed up on the beach. The wind stole his words, and the hammer of the raindrops was so loud that the sound created reminded Callan of white noise. What is? What's on the beach? Callan thought she heard the word whale in his reply, but couldn't be sure. What's on the beach? She asked again, bellowing over the wind. Everything. Fish, crabs, debris, the lot. The tide has brought tons of stuff. Everyone's helping themselves. Kellen peered down at the harbor through the sheet of rain. The occupants of the village were sprinting, some wading, through the flooded streets and towards the coastline. Ernest offered out his hand. Come on, before all the good stuff is taken. You can find something good to sell. Help your pa's sinking shop. Don't go to the beach. No? Ernest, wait. Stop. Kellen watched a flicker of irritation pass over his face. What? I don't think this is a good idea. Why not? It's free. The bounty of the sea. Ain't no law against it. Kellen shook her head and took a step back towards the shop. Pa said we should always respect the sea, she said, but knew, as soon as the words left her lips, that it was a feeble defense. You ain't got no spine, Ernest spat. Your pa would recognize opportunity when it came. If he were still here, that shop would be doing fine, wouldn't it? He turned and staggered his way back towards the harbor. Kellen stumbled through the water and to the shelter of her shop. Snatching up pa's binoculars, she scanned the beach. The lighthouse light washed over the sands, illuminating the scrap metal and shards of wreckage. Kellen wondered if they had come from a shipwreck, but then noticed that some of the debris was moving. Fish flopped helplessly in the sands as crabs attempted to escape the waves. Maybe it has been a fishing trawler. It hadn't been Ernest's ship. She could see that in the harbor, and no other ship had dared to leave the shelter of the seawall. Her gaze fell on a chunk of dull metal nestled on the edge of the beach. She shrieked when the metal rolled over and opened its mouth. She couldn't hear the animal's screams, but she could imagine them. The whale calf slapped its tail against the rocks, but remained ignored by the villagers as they searched for salvage. Kellen waited. The clouds were as black as tar, and the sea the same color to match. After an hour, she decided that a giant wave would not appear to wash the villagers away. Likewise, a sea monster would fail to materialize. Kaylin, still wrestling with the knot of dread in her stomach, continued to watch the ignored whale calf as its movements slowed and ceased. The humans passed around the carcass, either oblivious or uncaring. It's what the storm wants, her pa's voice said again, and no matter how much she tried, she couldn't ignore him. It's what the storm Once, Kellen spotted Ernest's ship leaving the harbor. The lighthouse began to lean. Ernest's ship disappeared under the collapsing tower and was replaced by a silent plume of water. The plume turned into a wave and began to advance. Kellen screamed. The beach vanished in an instant. The marine life reclaimed. The sea wall broke within seconds. Moments later, the harbor was destroyed. The ships at anchor swamped or cast aside as though they were children's toys. The occupants of the village were washed away, their screams stolen by the wind and salt water. The RNLI station was submerged from view. Kellen, fully realizing how pointless it was, bolted her shop door shut. The roof of the new town hall crumbled, disappearing behind the row of cottages. The wave charged up the cobbled street, the debris carried in its flow, striking the remaining homes like shrapnel. Kellen closed her eyes and thought of her pa. The wave reached her shop door, paused, and receded. She opened her eyes to see the water retreating down the hill, flowing back into the harbor and breaking upon the remains of the seawall. The rain had stopped. The clouds had drifted away. Port Carrick was silent, as was her pa's voice.